What's up, everybody? Glad you're back. Today I want to run through the top 6 mistakes that I made as a new lightweight backpacker. Backpacking is a skill, and just like any other skill, you get better over time, primarily by making dumb decisions and then learning from them. So, up first with mistake number 1 is not investing in quality layers. Look at this happy idiot backpacking on Mount St. Helens in the mid 40 degrees and rain wearing Levi's and cotton socks. Pretty dumb, and I'm lucky I didn't freeze to death. The reason being is that there's a saying that cotton kills. And while in most 3-season conditions it probably won't kill you, it could very well make your trip miserable. Synthetic and wool fabrics tend to dry much quicker than cotton, to the extent that even if you get just a little bit wet from rain or sweat or whatever, your body heat usually does a pretty good job of pushing it out of the fabric, allowing you to stay relatively dry and warm. With cotton, on the other hand, you just end up sort of perpetually waterlogged, which when combined with chilly weather, can make for a bad or possibly life-threatening time. Now, don't get me wrong, for your base layer, you don't need to run over to Patagonia and spend a ton of money. An inexpensive synthetic base layer from Walmart will do just fine in most cases. And this extends to rain gear as well. Feel free to work with a cheap poncho instead of the latest and greatest nano whatever fabric. Just make sure to get something that keeps you reasonably dry. Now, how you should approach layering clothing and whether to go with a waterproof breathable jacket or rain pants is really a bigger topic than we can get to here today. But the point is, I was treating my clothing selection like an afterthought rather than a critical decision. Up next at number 2 is buying a foam sleeping pad as my first and only sleeping pad. I'm not saying that foam pads are bad. In fact, I used one this past weekend for a 2-night trip and I slept like a little lamb. But as a relatively new backpacker that wanted to get out year-round and wasn't really conditioned to sleeping on the cold ground, it shouldn't have been my first choice. What drew me in here was the affordable price point and relatively low weight compared to inflatable alternatives. But the thing is, this sleeping pad has an R value of about 2, which if you're new to R values, it's really just a way of measuring how well the pad insulates you from the ground. The higher the R value, the better it insulates you and the warmer you'll sleep. For most people, a pad like this is going to be best for early spring through late summer into early fall. And because of this, I have had many cold nights on this sleeping pad wondering why I was freezing when I had a relatively warm sleeping bag. In hindsight, I should have picked up a warmer inflatable sleeping pad and then moved towards more ultralight options as my skills improved. Namely, the skills of campsite selection and being able to match the appropriate pad with the conditions. Number 3 is the complete opposite problem, where I purchased a sleeping bag that was way too warm. The first sleeping bag that I purchased was this Montbell UL Down Hugger, which is rated down to 7 degrees, and it was like the middle of July or something like that. I actually got it along with the Montbell sleeping pad from point number 2. My logic here was buy once, cry once, and invest in a warmer sleeping bag that I could use all year round, rather than have to buy a warmer sleeping bag later in the season. The problem here is that I severely underestimated how warm this sleeping bag actually is, and the amount of space that it took up in my pack was unnecessary for most conditions. I was all set to go on a backpacking trip that following weekend where it was supposed to be in the 90s, and after testing out my new sleeping bag in my apartment, I reluctantly went back to the Montbell store and bought another 45-degree sleeping bag that I could use so that I didn't roast alive. It was a very expensive week for gear. Because of the purchase of the 7-degree sleeping bag, which I absolutely love in colder weather, it's like sleeping on a cloud. My current lineup consists of the Montbell 7-degree, the Montbell 45-degree, and then I also have a 20-degree hoodless sleeping bag from Z-Packs, which gets the majority of the use throughout the year because I can easily quilt it out when I'm warm, or I can cinch it down really tight if I'm cold. If I were to do it all over again though, I'd probably start with a 40-degree bag, possibly synthetic, then gotten a 20-degree bag which I could use for fall, and then I could layer them together during the winter. All of that being said, I love my current sleeping bag rotation, and I love that I don't have to fiddle with layering things. I just could have saved myself quite a bit of money had I planned it out a bit ahead of time. Up next at number 4 is looking for a one-size-fits-all approach to backpacking. This one's a little bit more conceptual, but my brain is always looking for the most efficient way of doing things and then trying to build a single repeatable system from what it's learned. Sounds great, right? The quest for a simple process that you can use for any aspect of trail life, whether it's packing your bag, how you purify water, what your cook setup is like, and so on. The problem is, one-size-fits-all approaches don't really exist, and it's incredibly stressful to go looking for them because that search always eventually ends in frustration. I'll give you an example. we're led to believe that there are very specific rules for how you should pack your pack. Weight towards the middle and close to your back, and all of your gear neatly stacked horizontally in roughly the order that you intend to take it out at camp. If you can nail that, you've achieved some sort of hyper-efficient backpacking enlightenment, where setting up and taking down camp is nearly effortless. And don't get me wrong, these are great principles and we should try to follow them, but they don't always hold up in the real world. Once you throw in bulky winter insulation, a large tent like the triplex, or God forbid a bear can, achieving packing euphoria while also making things actually fit becomes increasingly difficult. This is what causes us to continue burning money on more better shaped stuff sacks, or buy new packs so that we can continue to make our nice horizontal stacks, rather than changing our approach a bit. As you all may know, I often pack vertically to accommodate everything, especially when using a large tent like the triplex. It's not because I prefer packing vertically necessarily, but it's because the mechanics of the situation dictate that I do so. This may not resonate with everybody out there, but for people out there that have obsessive compulsive tendencies like me, this is probably a familiar pattern. And the point is, I've learned to chill out a little bit and be more flexible in my approach. And in our fifth spot is having a stuff sack for everything. I love being organized, especially out on trail where a consistent fear of mine is losing something. This is actually part of why I got into lightweight and ultralight backpacking in the first place. Less stuff means less to worry about and keep track of. But when I first started out, this fear led me to believe that everything had to have its own little home so that it could be kept safe. So now a thought experiment. What's more organized? 20 pieces of gear in 20 stuff sacks, or 20 pieces of gear in 5 stuff sacks? The answer, of course, is 5, because if you put everything in its own stuff sack, it leaves you with the same degree of organization had you not used any stuff sacks at all. So my revised approach is to group together the tiny things, think first aid, repair, food, etc., to minimize the chances that things get lost when I'm digging around in my pack. Group together the things that get used together, like hygiene and cook kits, so that I can easily accomplish tasks like cooking and going to the bathroom with minimal hassle. Use stuff sacks to compress gear only when it's necessary to make everything fit. And finally, pack my remaining gear somewhat loosely to minimize the dead space that's in my pack. My aim is for just enough organization to maintain efficiency, no more, no less. And finally, at number 6 is denying myself any luxury items. For a long time, backpacking was all about all of the things that I didn't take with me while still maintaining a relative degree of safety and comfort. And I do think that this approach was helpful for my overall backpacking progression because it helped me get over packing all of my fears. But outside of summer, the nights here are long and rainy, and I'd often find myself just sitting under my tarp staring off into space with nothing better to do. Now, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with contemplation, and it's important to disconnect from time to time. Also, there's nothing wrong with pursuing lightness as a means to an end. I just find that I often enjoy the experience more when I can read a book, so now I bring my Kindle on most trips. As someone who enjoys the craft of backpacking, I found that one of the most difficult skills to master for me personally is dropping my ego and learning to pack for the goals of the trip rather than just the conditions and the duration. Sometimes that goal is to be as fast and light as possible, but more often than not, it's just to have a nice evening in the woods. So my attitude now is take that crossword puzzle book, enjoy some fresh fruits and veggies, take a deck of cards to play with Lynn. I'm only gonna get so many backpacking trips in this life, and I wanna come back with the best memories possible. All right, that's it for me, everybody. If you're new to lightweight backpacking, feel free to check out my video on how to get started with tarp camping. It should be floating around somewhere on the screen right about now. And as always, thank you once again for watching. It means the world to me, and we'll see you in the next one.